Alright, my friends, and welcome back. We're here to talk about 3 stocks today, and all 3 of these I want you to keep a close eye on. 2 of these, in my opinion, are in buy zones, with one of them being kind of in the range, but I would definitely wait for Volta specifically to cool down. But first, we're going to get into Palantir. Now, Kathy Wood has been buying up shares. Palantir dipped after the earnings. It dipped quite a bit, and I've been buying. So basically, they beat their earnings, the revenue, and the earnings per share. It disappointed. This is saying that it disappointed investors, seeing that it was a lot of government-focused contracts. Okay, so that's mostly why this article is saying that Palantir fell. Now, to me, I think it's definitely an overreaction in the market, and I've been buying up Palantir. And when you look at Palantir's chart, I see it definitely in a decent zone to buy. Okay, I see the downside being just a couple dollars. Like, downside could be $20. I don't see it going under 20 because it did bounce off the RSI as we came down, and I think we're finding a bottom. And when you look previously, we do like to bottom out at around 2150, 20, 22. So it's definitely a buy for me personally. And, if it does dip, it could dip very short term and then quickly rise. But this news caused this dip. But from a chart standpoint, I definitely see this as a buy, and we did gap down. And that was, I'm sure when earnings was reported, we had that gap down. We are actually under both the 100 and 200 day EMA. So for me, I think, the chart's lining up that it's, in my opinion, a little bit of an overreaction. I think it's definitely an overreaction, and I will happily be buying this one. I currently have calls, but this week coming up, I will be buying shares, especially if it can stay in this level or even trade lower. I would happily load the boat up on Palantir. But that's basically my thoughts on that. Now getting into the next stock here, we're going to look at Sens. I personally think it's in a buy zone, and if FDA approval for the 180-day CGM continuous glucose monitoring system does get approved and in effect, this will just spike. I'm telling you, this will spike probably more than it did back here in February. I can definitely see this running up huge, and if they don't get approved though, I can definitely see it pulling back, most likely even to that $2 range. If you guys want to listen to part of the earnings call, I do have a previous video. I'll leave it down below, or I'll leave it in the end screen for you. But I definitely love Sens. I love the company. I love the fact that they are working towards the 180-day continuous glucose monitoring, and then afterwards they're going to be working towards the whole full year continuous glucose monitoring system. And this is just a huge thing for diabetics and that community, and I think that this will just do fantastic over time. But time will tell with this one, and it all does greatly depend on the FDA approval, so keep that in mind. And I definitely see a potential run up as we near the FDA approval date coming at the end of the year here. So I could definitely see this running up a little bit. But yeah, I started buying this at about 370 or so, and as it comes down, I will keep loading up. But we did get very high volume into that earnings. Right after the earnings, we got a high volume, and then it took it all back. Just day traders and profit taking happening. But I like it where it's at, and I don't have any problems loading up on Sens. But you could always go with some calls. If you had 100 shares of this, you could even do a covered call, and just make that premium while this potentially trades sideways leading up to that date. I see it definitely trading sideways and maybe continuing slowly upwards as we near the FDA approval potential, and either spiking if it gets approved or just completely taking it all back if it doesn't get approved. But that's basically my thoughts on Sens, and this week I will be continuing to buy. Now next up is gonna be Volta, and this has actually been one that a lot of the bigger YouTubers have been talking about lately. Now keep in mind, guys, we talked about this one back when it was like $6, $7, and I'm just gonna say be careful with this one. It has run up a lot, okay, and their earnings was good. So some things to take note of that were some highlights of their earnings, and in the earnings call, it was the Six Flags agreement, making EV charging accessible at their parks all across the US. And then next up, the launch of the Predict EV product, which is a machine learning and artificial intelligence driven solution for infrastructure planning with a multi-year commitment from Southern Company, the second largest utility company in the US, to utilize the product in its transportation electrification programs. So I think that's pretty big news. Now another thing is they're actually partnering with Bloomberg for the first of its kind air pollution scoreboard. Now, from what I understand with this is that basically on the screens, Volta, they have the advertisements, and they're basically going to feature climate change focused editorial content across their network. And when you look at revenue, the revenue grew 77% year over year to 8.5 million compared to 4.8 million in the prior year period. But network development revenue did decrease year over year due to a decrease in customer-owned installations. Now, they did make $350 million from the business combination when they were a SPAC with Tortoise Acquisition. Something important here that I wanted you to see. Okay, now their revenue for the year is 8.5 million, but stock-based compensation was 4.2 million. Okay, so that's a one-time expense for stock-based compensation, meaning that the executives got paid. Now, that's quite a considerable amount when you consider how much they actually made for revenue on the year. But, it's something to just be aware of. I'm personally not going to be buying this one now. I want to wait for it to cool off. And if you actually look at the RSI, it does show that it's overbought. Saying that, it could run up a little bit more, but I'm personally just going to wait for this to cool down. We do have a gap here, and we had a gap here, but it got filled. So you can see that it does sometimes like to fill its gaps, although here it hasn't filled this one. So be careful with this one, guys. I think it's a little overextended personally. It could try to crush new highs at that $14 level, but I just see the upside. The risk versus reward for me just isn't worth it for this one. I took my profits, got out. I'll be looking for this at around $10 if I can get it. If not, good for everybody that's held on, and props to you guys if it does run up. But personally, I'm just going to wait for this one and be patient. I took my profits, and I've actually been kind of building up my cash and just preparing for any huge dips in the market. It's always a good thing to keep your cash balance strong. Keep maybe, anywhere from 10 to 30% is typically what's recommended. I like to stay around 20%. But, sometimes I get a little low on cash, and then I'll take profits on certain stocks and then build out my cash balance. But I always do like to have a nice cushion of cash, and I highly recommend that. It'll help you guys sleep at night. But that's basically it for the video. To top it off, just a short one of 3 stocks to watch out for, 2 to buy and 1 to watch. But thanks again, guys. Consider hitting like and subscribe if you like my content, and I will see you guys on the next one.